won't be here. But they're not doing that, so they're squishy. Now we have a Congress that's fighting over a $60 billion spending reduction in a budget that's $3.7 trillion. Do you know what that means? It's one speck of sand in a pail. That's exactly what it is. And they can't even solve that. So you know they're dancing. You know that basically they don't want to hit any of the hard stuff. It's all going to be squishy. Now what does that mean? It means a couple of things. I think one, I don't know if you saw the picture of Nancy Pelosi when she gave the gavel to John Boehner. Did you see that in the Wall Street Journal, the picture that? Okay, it describes basically perfectly what Congress is about. They are the most basically ineffective, stupid, basically idiot group of people I've ever seen in my life. I don't know how they got there, all right? But look at this. There she is smiling. Now, she has to smile because she's had so many facelifts she can't close her mouth. At the end of the day, she's always smiling. So you tell her that Moscow is burning, and she's going, oh, that's too bad. Okay. And then she hands this gavel to him, and he's crying. Always crying. No matter what you tell him, he's crying with a handkerchief that looks like it's the size of the American flag. Now, see, what's really frightening when you look at those people is they're third in line to be president of the United States. Do you understand that? If Mr. Obama dies, if Joe Biden blows up in a plane, those two get to be president, one of them, depending on when they're Speaker of the House. That is frightening. You got one that can't close her mouth because she's had so goddamn many facelifts that she can't breathe. You got the other one that no matter what you tell him, he's crying. What the hell is he crying for? Stop crying. And those are the pictures that go around the world saying, this is it, the best we have to offer you around the world. Now you know why it's gloomy out there. Now you know why we're in trouble. So at the end of the day, they're going to basically run around with the squishy stuff. So what are the things they're looking at? Well, let's talk about that. One of the things I don't know you've heard about is this 3.8% tax that's in the health care bill. Have you heard about that one? Well, that is not a health care tax. That is a real estate tax that's going to support health care. So let me explain to you what it is. If they do not change this by 2013, here's what's going to happen. Anything you touch in real estate, whether it's a principal residence, whether it's investment property, dividends, or income from real estate, is going to be taxed an extra 3.8%. So you own a principal residence, you'll get the 121, the 250, and 500,000. Anything else that appreciates, you'll pay appreciation taxes where they are, and then you'll be taxed an extra 3.8%. Anything you sell commercial goes from day one. So that's one thing that they're looking at. That's going to be a tremendous tax for people. The second thing is, they're looking at capping the mortgage deduction. And eventually, I think they will do it. What the commission came out with was $500,000, cap it at that, and anybody who makes an income over $250,000, they start to tax you from day one. So at the end of the day, here's why I think they'll do it, because they're looking for money every which way from Sunday. I don't think it's going to happen right away, so don't mention it to your clients, please. But I think after this presidential election, they're going there, because they're going to do the squishy stuff. They're not going to hit the hard stuff. And I think at the end of the day, here's how they're going to sell it. They always sell this stuff by saying we're going to tax the rich. You know that. That's the key word. It's politically PC correct to say that. Well, here's the problem. If you make $250,000 and you live in Fargo, North Dakota, that's rich. If you live in California, that's not rich, and that's who's going to get hit. But let's talk about it. You fly from San Francisco to New York. 4.5 hours, you're over the heartland of America. Today we found out from NAR that the median price of a home in America is $152,000. Do you think they care a rat's ass whether they cap it at $500,000? No, they don't, because it affects California. Now let me tell you a little bit about how you can help that. Do not mention it, please, but when they start to talk about it, this is a high-tax state, all right? One of the things most people don't realize is, you get the $1.1 million now deduction, you know that, against whatever income tax rate you pay. What most people don't realize is, if you have people that are buying $7, $8 million homes, they have enough income that they're going to hit something called the alternative minimum tax. Now, you've heard about that. Now, the alternative minimum tax is a tax that when you hit a certain income level, all the things you get to deduct go away. Mortgage income, property taxes, DMV taxes, state taxes. So at the end of the day, see, here's how it's going to work out. If they bring it down to 28% and they cap it at $500,000, if you have somebody that's buying a $4 million house in Saratoga, I will guarantee you they're in the alternative minimum tax. They're not even getting 28%. They're getting less than that as a deduction because they hit the alternative minimum tax, their deduction for mortgage goes away anyway. So at the end of the day, it may be a benefit, not. Don't tell them, because we don't want them to know, because if they know, they'll lower it and everything will be bad. So at the end of the day, you got to get to these accountants and find out alternative minimum tax. All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about what's happening in Japan, and let's talk a little bit about what's happening in the Middle East. Japan, obviously a tragedy. They will rebuild their country. It's going to take years. You're going to see their GDP go negative, then it'll go positive because of all the reconstruction that's going there. Everybody says, why did the yen go up? It should have gone down and the dollar should have gone up, and instead it went down. Well, one, everybody was shorting the yen, so they have to cover their shorts. People are bringing the yen back because they know they need that money for reconstruction. The Bank of Japan has flooded it. The world has now flooded it to try to bring it back down. I think at the end of the day, here's what's going to happen to the yen. The yen will be strong, and then it's going to go back to being a little bit weak, because here's the problem in Japan. Their GDP is 200% of the debt, okay, that's a big deal. They have an aging population. Now, the only thing that's different between their debt and ours, our debt is owed to other people. Their debt is owed to the Japanese people, so they have a little more flexibility with it. But at the end of the day, they're an economy that's been in stagflation for many, many years, and they've had trouble jump-starting it. Now, how is Japan going to affect us? Well, obviously it affects the whole world, but the biggest way it affects us is they do this just-in-time inventory now, all the big companies of the world, where they don't put anything up unless they need it. Well, they've lost 30% of their power. I mean, you just don't do what they did after what they've had and get everything up and running again. Even though some of these are coming on board, Nissan's going back on board, Sony will. You're not going to get this stuff for 5 or 6 months. Some of these ports you can't even get into. So at the end of the day, it means that over here, supplies that we use, and remember, they supply 60% of every silicon chip in the United States and in the world. They supply a lot of parts. They're duplicators. They're not necessarily creators. They make the parts that go into equipment. They take something that we make and they make it even better, and they do it cheaper. So at the end of the day, that's going to be a supply problem, and that will affect us. That's why it's going to basically take some of our GDP, and it'll affect the whole world. But they will come out of it. Do you notice what great people they are? Do you notice not one incident of looting? Do you notice that? Do you notice how they line up, how well behaved they are? If you had that in some cities in America, they would have basically destroyed the place. It's an amazing group of people that they are. They're so well behaved. You have to admire them, don't you? And God, they've gone through hell there. Okay, so that's Japan. Now let me talk about the Middle East before we get into real estate. Middle East, very interesting place. Obviously, we have been there since World War II, big time. And why are we there? Because of the oil. You know that. We wouldn't give a rat's ass other than that, okay? Let's be honest and be fair. At my age, I'm not PC correct. Let's just say it the way it is. All the humanitarian, all that's great, wonderful, but we're there because of their oil. Otherwise, we'd leave those people alone. At the end of the day, if you looked at the Middle East pre-World War II, it never looked like that. There was no Iraq. Those were 3 tribes there. Jordan was created. It would look very different. Now, all of a sudden, all the powers of the world after World War II decided to make these all countries. Well, they don't get along anyway, all right? But we decided they would be democratic, we would make them countries, they would come into the 21st century, life would be wonderful. Well, at the end of the day, that didn't quite happen, because 1, you have dictators there. 2, they basically have huge unemployment there. They have young populations that are unhappy. Oh, and by the way, they all got the internet. So now they're looking at the internet, see? So these poor people that walk around with these burqa, these women, somebody shows them a camera and says, hey, look at Brazil, they're having a carnival there. See these women in bikinis? And they're going, oh my God, why can't I be like that? Okay, so at the end of the day, it started with Egypt, right? Egypt, 30% unemployment, 50% of their population is under the age of 25. Food prices went up 125%. They had access to the internet. They didn't want Mubarak to stay in, and they really didn't want his son. Now you have a little bit of a riot, but remember, that's still pretty culturally very much basically Egyptian. They're pretty well educated. It wasn't a violent revolution. The army's in control. They were there. They were watching it. The army's still in control. They will have an election. They just had a constitutional vote on Saturday. They voted for the Constitution. That will be basically a democracy by their terms, not ours. It'll be fine. Then you got Libya. Oh my God, Libya's a totally different place. You got a mental case there. He's been in for the same time as Mubarak, but you know what he's going to do. He's not going to leave. He won't leave. He'll burn that country down. He will blow it up before he leaves. You have the no-fly zone now, costing us $300 million a week. Are you listening to me? A week. At the end of the day, they're not going to stop him. At the end of the day, he's not leaving. So at the end of the day, they may stop him from killing his people, but I bet you at the end of the day, they will let him hold on there. And at the end of the day, do we care? Well, maybe. But that's 3 tribes there. Even if he leaves, there's going to be a civil war. There's no government. There's no structure. There's no legal. There's no judiciary. There's no banking system. What are you going to save there? I don't know. So at the end of the day, they do 2% of the world's oil, light crude. The Saudi Arabians have taken it up. And so at the end of the day, look at the difference between Egypt and Libya. Then you obviously have Saudi Arabia, and we can't let that go bad because they do supply a lot of oil. They got the little king there. He's having a little bit of trouble. He came home. He brought $36 billion with him to give away so that everybody has no debt now. Life is great. Another $26 billion behind. The clerics there have backed him, so he's probably pretty safe. You have Beltrain, not even oil producing. Why do they hate everything? Why are they rioting there? They have a $27,000 a year income, so they shouldn't be poor. They're not. They don't have high unemployment. Aha, we learned this in Iraq. They have a Sunni royal family, and the population is Shiite. The Sunnis hate the Shiites. That's why we've had trouble in Iraq, and every time we build something, they destroy it, because they don't like each other. That's why they were tribes, and that's the problem. So the Sunnis, they want that royal family out. They want the Shiites in. Saudi Arabia's now sends troops in because that's on their border. So at the end of the day, look, you got them all rioting. You got everybody out of control. Everything is happening there. At the end of the day, I think this. Look, oil, it went up to 103 today. Okay, fine. It's going to go up and down. It's not about supply and demand. The Middle East is a little bit on fire. OPEC is not going to let oil go out of control. Believe me, it is not in their best interest. They need the bucks. At the end of the day, it's going to be basically greedy people who are playing the shorts, who basically are playing the futures, who are making as much money as they can, all right? I think at the end of the day, oil will come back down, probably be in the 90s. Let me tell you when we have a problem. If oil gets to 125, it's a big problem. We're going into a world depression. The world cannot afford it at that. All right. So look, we're rocking and rolling out there, depending where you are. So what I'm going to go back and say now is, see, when you look at the United States economy, how boring we are, and how basically how nice it's going along here versus the rest of the world. But we're impacted by that. All right, let me talk about the real estate market. And in order to do that, the first thing I want to talk about is lending. Now, I want to talk about lending because I don't know if you realize it, but lending last year, if you had an 850 FICO score, put 30% down, you probably could get a loan. It was tight, the underwriting was terrible, the banks weren't lending, but if you were a really qualified buyer, you could get a loan. Now, here's the deal with this year. This year, lending is going to get really different this year. First of all, they can't buy against interest rates because it's not just about interest rates. It has to be about matching them with a product that will basically fund for them. So work with your people here. You have a great group here. You need to have that association because here's what I'm telling you. You can have an 850 FICO score. You can put 30% down, but they don't want to do basically condominiums in San Jose because they have too much exposure and risk there. So it doesn't matter if you bring God in. They don't want to do it. Okay, they don't like the reserves. They don't like the renters to ownership. They don't like that. They like this market, they don't like that market. They like this borrower, they don't like that borrower. Well, look at somebody at 680. No, we won't. We only want somebody who has a 780 FICO score. So it's who you are as the buyer that basically makes the difference. Now let's talk about Fannie, Freddie, and FHA. They do 9 out of every 10 loans in the United States of America, which means you don't get a loan in America that doesn't go through a government agency. Now what do we know? We know that they're in conservatorship, Fannie and Freddie. We know that the government wants to get out of the business because they have too much risk. We have given Fannie and Freddie $145 billion over the last 18 months, and they want to back out. So what are they going to do short term? What are they going to do long term? Short term, they're starting to add fees to loans to basically low down their risk. So starting April 1st, here's the deal. Number one, they are basically starting something called a no-risk aversion fee. It will go on every single loan that Fannie and Freddie puts out. Whether you're 850 and basically 30% down, or you're 680 and you basically put 10% down. It's going to be from 1/4% up to 3% of the value of the loan. So an example, you buy a $500,000 condominium, you have an 825 FICO score, and you're 30% down, you'll pay 1/4%. You buy the same condominium, you're 680. You only put 10% down. You're going to pay 3% of the value of that loan. Now, you either pay it in increased interest rates, up front, or over the life of the loan. So at the end of the day, here's what I'm telling you. A loan starting April 1st, and the banks are already working it in, if you're closing past April 1st, is going to cost you 5 to 8% more than it costs you today. They need to know that, because that's the way it is. Second thing, if they do not extend on October, the cap on Fannie and Freddie, it goes from $729,750 to $625,250. So the cap is going down. Last thing, FHA, PMI. They're going to keep the 1% up front, but they're changing the yearly fees. So the yearly fees, which used to be 0.8 and 0.9%, are going up over 1%. Now what does that mean? You go out, you buy a $300,000 condominium, you used to pay $300 in fees, now you're going to pay $383, that's an increase of 28%. So at the end of the day, the first thing is, it's great what the price of real estate is. Now let's put that into perspective. So you've got a buyer out there. They see a $500,000 condominium and they're holding back. Interest rates are going to go down. No, they're not. Oh, but it's going to go down to 480, Carol. Great. It may. You know what? Let's look at your loan now. If interest rates go up 0.5%, you got to pay those fees. Guess what? Your mortgage payment over 30 years is going to be more at 500 than if you bought it basically at 480. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're going to get a better deal at 500, and it will cost you less on your mortgage than the mortgage at 480. So you have to not only talk the price of real estate with these people now, you also have to show them numbers for loans and what that loan is going to cost them. That's what's different than last year, number one. All right, let me talk about the oasis in the desert. Now, I want to talk first of all, you have your markets. Foreclosures, you still have not many here. You have the middle tier of the market, that's the bread and butter market, and you have the high end. Look, foreclosures. We know that the banks have been terrible at them. Are they holding them? Yes, they are. Is there shadow inventory? Is there 2 million more coming? Yes, there is. Why did the banks hold them? Why don't they care? And what's going to change? Well, you know why the banks held them. Because basically, first of all, until they declared them a foreclosure or short sale, it's an asset on the books. After that, they basically either put it out there or they don't. They like foreclosures better than short sales. The government's pushing short sales, but in a foreclosure, they're in control. In a short sale, you got a wacko first, a wacko second, you got wacko sellers, you got liens against the property. Everybody's fighting everybody. Nobody wants to come to the plate. Is it the bank that owns it? Is it a servicer? Is it an investor? Everybody has different goals and everybody wants different things. It's the sale from hell. But at the end of the day, the banks got a write-off from the government. So it didn't matter what they did. If they put it on the market, they took the loss, the government ate the rest, gave them a basically a write-off against the losses, against their profits, but that's going away this year. So you're going to see the banks get out of this business, trust me. And they're going to basically give it over to investors and hedge funds that are coming in big time into the market. Why? Because they're going to buy 30 cents on the dollar, they're going to pay basically no interest. When they refinance it, it's 5%. They know that if you just wait long enough with inflation, the stars are aligned for real estate. I don't know how nobody gets it. How do you know that? Goldman Sachs, $1 billion fund coming out to buy distressed real estate property. CalPERS, you know, the California, $1 billion going back in the real estate business to buy distressed property. Why? The stars are aligned for real estate. Think about it. It's affordable, right? It's down 30%, maybe 20%, 10% in some areas. Interest at 5%, it's a gift. Trust me, it is free money. And if you just sit there long enough, don't do anything with it if you buy it in the right place. Now, you can't buy it in Las Vegas, Nevada, or Florida, and Texas. See, that was the mistake. You bought crap to begin with. So why would you think it was valuable? See, the first thing about an asset, if you'd like it to appreciate, it's good to buy one with value. That's usually a good starting point. You buy crap, you get crap coming out. It's like a bad marriage. You get a bad marriage going in, you married the wrong person, then you wonder what happened when you wake up to the whole body and you got trouble. Well, because maybe you married a part of the body instead of the whole thing. You found out you got the whole thing and it was the crap. Look, you buy value, you get value coming out. So you bought it cheap now, you got free interest almost, and if you just wait long enough, because of inflation, it'll be fine. Value, time, and money. Don't leverage the hell out of it. Real estate here didn't basically disappoint everybody. It's what they did with it. You can't go in, ATM it, skip it, try to trade it, and then wonder what happened to it. You buy valuable in the San Francisco Bay Area, limited resource. You're not getting any more land here. You basically leverage it intelligently, conservatively. You buy it at a good interest rate. You hold it for a period of time. It'll be fine. So the stars are aligned. It's 30% down. Absolutely.